Good day, everyone, and again, welcome to our fifth session in Introduction to the Philosophy of the Human Person. For today's lesson, we will be talking about human person as an embodied spirit. The question now is, who is the human person? You are probably wondering why there is a need to ask such a question when you know that you yourself are human. However, you might want to pause for a while and contemplate the answer to that question. That is why, in this lesson, we will be discussing the concept of a human being according to Plato, Aristotle, and Descartes. We will take a look on how they address the question, what makes us human? Philosophers were initially concerned with defining the essential characteristic that makes a person human. This essential characteristic is what distinguishes us from plants, animals, and other living things. Many agree that this essential characteristic is nothing else but our being rational beings. Our rationality makes us superior to all others because it is the highest form of activity and no other being has it. This lesson will also discuss the idea of how the human being is said to have two important components, no other than a body and a soul. And of course, we will be also talking about the relationship between these two. To begin with, let us have a short video presentation. One of the dominant themes in the course Introduction to the Philosophy of the Human Person is the idea that the human person is an embodied spirit. But first of all, we need to define terms here because, as it appears, the meaning of the concept embodied spirit is not directly clear to students who do not have a strong background and orientation in philosophy. So, what do we exactly mean by embodied spirit? The most direct connotation that comes to mind when we say something is embodied is that it is being materialized or incarnated. Hence, when we say embodied spirit, we normally thought of a spirit being incarnated. However, the idea of the human person as an embodied spirit does not necessarily refer to the incarnation or materialization of spirit as an immaterial entity. The embodiment of the spirit in the context of Christian philosophy specifically refers to the inseparable union of body and soul. Thus, when we say embodied spirit, we mean that the body is not separate from the soul, just as the soul is not separate from the body. And so, when we say that the human person is an embodied spirit, we specifically mean that the human person is the point of convergence between the material and spiritual entity. That is, between the body and soul. We cannot talk, therefore, of the human person without the union of body and soul, just as we cannot talk of anything without the union of matter and form. Now, to understand the specificity of the human person as an embodied spirit is important because, aside from the fact that it enables us to know our potentialities and limitations, it also exposes us to a thorough and deeper understanding of ourselves as a unique creature united by body and soul. With this idea in mind, let us now proceed to an engagement with one of the most famous philosophers in this particular scholarship, namely Aristotle. Before we engage on Aristotle's account on the human person as an embodied spirit, that is again as a union of body and soul, it is important at this point to provide the theoretical context of this issue. As we may already know, Aristotle's account of the human person as an embodied spirit is in large part a reaction against Plato's take on the nature of the human person. For Plato, the nature of the human person is seen in the metaphysical dichotomy between body and soul. This dichotomy implies that there is an inherent contradiction between the body and soul. On the one hand, the body, according to Plato, is material. Hence, it is mutable and destructible. On the other hand, the soul is immaterial. Hence, it is immutable and indestructible. Inasmuch as the body is material, mutable, and destructible, while the soul is immaterial and immutable and indestructible, Plato contends that in the context of the nature of the human person, the body's existence is dependent on the soul, while the soul's existence is independent of the body. In fact, Plato argues that the soul existed prior to the body. Plato writes, "The gods made the soul prior to the body, and more venerable in birth and excellence to the body's mistress and governor." Interestingly then, as Eddie Baber claims, the contention made Plato conclude that the human person is just a soul using a body. According to Plato, there are three parts of the soul, namely the rational, the spiritual, and the appetitive. Plato tells the myth of the charioteer to comprehend the complex nature of the soul. But we will not discuss this topic here, since our task here is just to provide an overview of Plato's account of the human person, which serves as a background to Aristotle's account of the human person as an embodied spirit. For Plato, the rational soul is located in the head, the spiritual soul in the chest, and the appetitive in the abdomen. According to Plato, the spiritual and appetitive souls contribute to the motion and activity of the whole person, while the rational soul's function is to guide the spiritual and appetitive souls. According to Plato, the appetitive part of the soul drives the human person to experience thirst, hunger, and other physical wants, while the spiritual soul drives the human person to experience abomination, anger, and other emotional feelings. Lastly, it is the rational part of the soul that enables the human person to think, reflect, analyze, comprehend, draw conclusions, and the like. As we can see, the rational soul, which is the highest of all parts of the soul, guides the other two parts, namely the appetitive and the spiritual. What else could perform this guiding function from Plato's point of view than the rational part of the soul? Think of a desperately thirsty man in the desert. He sees a pool of water and approaches it with all the eagerness that deprivation is able to create. But when he reaches the pool, he sees a sign, danger. Do not drink, polluted. He experiences conflict within. His desire urges him to drink, but reason tells him that such signs usually indicate the truth, that polluted water will make him very ill or may kill him, and that if he drinks, he will probably be worse off than he doesn't. He decides not to drink. In this case, it is the rational part of the soul that opposes his desire. His reason guides him away from the water. The principle then that drives the person to drink is called appetite, while the principle that pervades the person to drink the water because it is polluted called reason. Another example could be that of a man who is angry with another person who insulted him. Out of anger, he may desire to kill his maker, but does not actually kill the culprit because he knows that if he does, he will be imprisoned. With the same thread of reasoning, Plato argues that it is the spirit in man that makes the person angry with his derider. Yet, his anger is curbed by reason, that is, by the rational soul. Hence, again, for Plato, desire, spirit, and reason make up the soul. Desire motivates, spirit animates, and reason guides. And for Plato, if reason can successfully guide desire and spirit, then the human person will attain a well-balanced personality. If we recall for Plato, the soul exists prior to the body. Hence, the soul is an entity distinct from the body. Now, it is important to note that if we talk about the human person, we talk about the body and that they are inseparable. But this is not the case for Plato. Plato believes that the body and the soul are separable. In fact, for Plato, as already mentioned, the human person is just a soul using a body. And Plato believes that the soul is imprisoned in the body, and that the soul survives the death of the body because it is immaterial, immutable, and indestructible. This means that for Plato, when the person dies, the body decomposes, while the soul lives the body and goes back to the world of forms. It must be noted that in Plato's doctrine of form, there are two kinds of worlds, namely, the world of forms and the world of matter. And for Plato, everything comes from the world of forms, and everything that exists will go back to the world of forms after it perishes. Again, when the human person dies, the body decomposes, and the soul will go back to the world of forms and lives there eternally. It is here where Aristotle's notion of the human person as an embodied spirit comes in. Indeed, Aristotle disagrees with Plato's dualism, which implies the concept of otherworldliness. Aristotle believes that there is no dichotomy between the person's body and soul. The body and soul for Aristotle are in a state of unity. They are inseparable. Hence, unlike Plato, Aristotle believes that we cannot talk about the soul apart from the body and vice versa. Now, how does Aristotle view the human person as an embodied spirit? First, we need to understand that the term soul is the English translation of the Greek word psyche, and for Aristotle, the general definition of the soul involves the concept of life. Thus, the soul for Aristotle is the principle of life. This suggests, therefore, that anything that has life has a soul. As the principle of life, the soul causes the body to live. Indeed, it is the soul that animates the body. If the soul is the animator of the body acts as the motor to the soul. Hence, Aristotle believes that the soul is the form to the body, while the body is the motor to the soul. For Aristotle, everything that exists is composed of matter and matter and form are indeed inseparable. Hence, we cannot talk about any object if either of these entities is not present. In the context of the human person, Aristotle believes that body and soul are inseparable. Body and soul, therefore, constitute the human person as a whole. Because for Aristotle, anything that has life has a soul. Then it follows that plants and animals have souls. Thus, Aristotle distinguishes three levels of soul, namely that of plants, that of animals, and that of humans. The kind of soul that is found in plants, according to Aristotle, is called vegetative, while those found in animals and humans are called sensitive and rational souls, respectively. According to Aristotle, plants have souls because they possess the three basic requirements for something to be called a living being. That is, the capacity to grow, reproduce, and feed itself. However, plants do not share the higher levels of soul, although they grow, reproduce, and feed themselves. Plants are not capable of feeling and thinking. Sensitive souls also grow, reproduce, and feed themselves. But unlike vegetative souls, sensitive souls are capable of sensation. As Aristotle writes, plants possess only the nutritive faculty, but other beings possess both it and the sensitive faculty. And if they possess the sensitive faculty, they must also possess the appetitive. For appetite consists of desire, anger, and will. All animals possess at least one sense, that of touch. Anything that has a sense is acquainted with pleasure and pain, with what is pleasant and what is painful. And anything that is acquainted with this has desire, since desire is an appetite for pleasant. Finally, rational souls grow, reproduce, feed themselves, and feel. But unlike the sensitive souls, rational souls are capable of thinking. According to Aristotle, this highest level of soul is present only in humans. Now, since humans possess all the characteristics of animals, that is, the capacity to grow, reproduce, feed itself, and feel, in addition to being rational, Aristotle concludes that human person is just an animal that thinks. As Aristotle's famous dictum on the human person goes, man is a rational animal. Right? So I hope you understand well the concept of Aristotle and Plato when it comes to the human person. And now, let us have another philosopher in the person of René Descartes. Both Plato and Aristotle consider human beings as having two elements, the body and the soul. The problem now seems to be focused on how the body is related to the soul. Plato makes the gap between the body and soul more pronounced, while Aristotle tries to dissolve the gap. Review tayo. In our previous discussion, through the use of a video presentation where I discussed the concept of the human person, according to Aristotle and Plato, they made the same summary. Ano po yung summary na yon? They made the same generalization or conclusion that a human person is a composite of body and soul. Binigyang diin nila na ang tao ay binubuo ng katawan at ng kaluluwa. Ang tanong ngayon ay ano or papaano nagkakaroon ng ugnayan ang katawan at kaluluwa. Actually, René Descartes, who is a French philosopher, did not explain it well. Bakit? Sa halip, he widened the gap between the body and the soul even more as he sets out to prove that the only thing in this world which cannot be doubted is the existence of the thinking self. In the Meditations on First Philosophy, René Descartes argues for the real distinction between the body and the soul. He began with doubting everything that had previously been considered as knowledge. So sa halip na mapagtugma at mapag-ugnay niya ano ang kinalaman ng kaluluwa at saka ng katawan sa isa't isa, kabaligtaran, kabalintunaan ang ginawa ni René Descartes. Kasi mas pinaglayo niya ang agwat at mas nagkaroon siya ng komplikadong paliwanag tungkol sa katawan at kaluluwa. Bakit? Sapagkat tiningnan niya ang kaluluwa bilang may sariling pagkakakilanlan, may sariling kakanyahan, at gayon din naman ang katawan bilang hiwalay sa kaluluwa. Claiming that the senses are the sources of previously established knowledge and that the senses are not reliable, Descartes argued that we should doubt everything that is delivered to us by our senses. But how can we doubt something which is already obviously real, like when we look at our classmates or talk to our teacher or even hold a book? Sabi ni René Descartes, teka muna, mukhang kailangan nating pagdudahan lahat ng ibinibigay sa atin ng senses natin. Ano man ang ating naaamoy gamit ang ating ilong, ano man ang ating nakikita gamit ang ating mata, ano man ang ating nalalasahan gamit ang ating dila, and so on and so forth, according to René Descartes, should be doubted. Dapat daw pagdudahan. Why? Sabi niya, may nagtanong ngayon, ano? So, papaano daw natin pagdududahan ang mga bagay na obvious naman? For example, tumingin ka doon sa paligid at nakita mong may taong naglalakad, you are certain na ito yung nakita mo, you are very sure with what you see. The question now is, does it still make sense to us whether they are real? And you know what? The answer of René Descartes? It is yes. Yes, it should still be asked whether what our senses deliver to us are actually real, even if they seem to be certain. Because according to him, certainty does not guarantee truth. So magkaiba ang sigurado sa tinatawag nating katotohanan or totoo. Kung kaya nga para kay René Descartes, bagamat nakikita ng ating mata, bagamat naaamoy ng ating ilong, nalalasahan ng ating dila, nararamdaman ng ating balat, and so on and so forth, kailangan pa din itong pagdudahan. Bakit? Sapagkat hindi lahat ng tayo ay sigurado ay tiyak natin na ito ay totoo. As he added, according to him, you can still be mistaken that what you are experiencing right now while reading this book is not actually happening, as in the case of a dream. How many times have you experienced being in a situation which appears to be so real, only to realize that you were dreaming after waking up? Descartes then argues that if this is the case, it will be wise to consider everything that is delivered by the senses as false, including the existence of our own body. The next question is, can he deny himself altogether? Is it possible that he does not exist? Descartes thought that it is impossible for him not to exist. The only thing which he cannot doubt was that he doubts, which is a form of thinking. He may doubt his bodily existence because he can be deceived by his senses, but he cannot doubt his thinking because his thinking requires a subject, the thinker. And the more he rejects his existence, the more he becomes certain that he exists. Thus, he establishes his own reality with the famous line, I think, therefore I am. The subject, I, however, of this claim does not refer to a man or to rational animal. So what did René Descartes is trying to say in his dictum or idea of I think therefore I am? The most important thing that René Descartes emphasized is the reality that a human person must doubt, because the more the human person doubts, the more he thinks. And the moment that the human person thinks, that is a proof that the human person really exists. Okay? So, for René Descartes, the existence of the soul, known as the thinking thing or thinking self, is more distinct and clear than the existence of the body, leaving us with the idea that man is more certain of the existence of his soul than the existence of his body. Descartes ultimately proved the existence of his own body and all external things as well. However, the problem of how the soul is related to the body is still not clearly answered by Descartes. For our purposes, it is important to note how Descartes thought of the soul as distinct from the body, and how he identified the foundation of certainty to something which does not include a body, and that is no other than the thinking self or the thinking thing. From there, we could say that the concept of a human being of Plato, Aristotle, and Descartes are not the only existing views of human beings for sure. Nevertheless, they represent the dominant views, which is human beings as composite of body and soul, and as having an essential characteristic of rationality. The dualistic view of man considers man as having two essential elements, no other than the body and the soul. And in this dualistic perspective, it is the soul which gets the upper hand, while the body is treated with dislike for reasons like source of error, restricting, corruptible, and so on and so forth. The essentialist perspective, on the other hand, claims that there must be an essential characteristic that a being must possess for it to be called as such. And in the case of human beings, it is rationality. Okay, balikan natin, ano? Sabi natin, maaaring pagdating sa konsepto ng tao or kabuuan ng tao, maaaring hindi lamang si Plato, si Aristotle, at si René Descartes ang nagbigay ng sarili nilang mga filosofiya, ng sarili nilang pagpapaliwanag at mga ideya. So aside from these three philosophers, there are lots of philosophers who gave their own concept of the human being. So bakit ito ang tinalakay natin at bakit ito ang binigyang pansin natin? Sapagkat kung ating titingnan, kahit papaano, meron silang pagkakatulad-tulad. At ano po yun? That a human person is a composite of body and soul. And the most important thing about the concept of a human being as a composite of body and soul is that a human person is a person that thinks. Okay? Uulitin ko po ha. Ang tao na binubuo ng katawan at ng kaluluwa ay may bahagi ng tinatawag nating rasyonalidad. So, upang ang tao ay matawag na isang tao, ang pinakamahalagang aspeto ng kanyang pagkatao ay walang iba kundi ang kanyang rasyonalidad or yung tinatawag nating kakayanan niyang mag-isip. And that made us different from all other creatures. From the concept of the human being, let us now proceed to the limitations and transcendence. This lesson will discuss the weaknesses and imperfections of an embodied being and how these limitations may be addressed. It is with good reason that we consider the body as having a number of weaknesses because we have many experiences that manifest the truth of this idea. A quote from the Gospel of Matthew says it best. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. This line shares the Platonic sentiment of the tension between the body and the soul. Having a body is a tantamount to having a lot of limitations when it comes to the human being. This range from the moral, the epistemological, to the most obvious physiological. Many moral issues, many problems regarding knowledge acquisitions, and many physical limitations can be attributed to the body of the human person. In this lesson, however, we shall leave the moral aspect of bodily limitations and focus instead on the limitations set by the body in an existential way. Let us begin with some questions. How can you describe the taste of water? How will you describe the color blue to a blind person? How will you describe how wonderful the world is to a blind person? Can you reach your chin using the tip of your elbow? These questions actually speaks about our limitations and weaknesses as a human person. An embodied subject whose being is to be in the world will have its first limitation the moment it is born. We already said that being in the world means that the moment we were born, we are already related to people, especially our parents, which is our first limitation. What does it mean? We did not choose our parents. We are born in a particular time and place, and we did not choose them. We were never consulted about the time of our birth. We were never asked where we would like to be born. In other words, there are lots of things which are already in and with us when we are born. And you know what? This is what the French philosopher in the person of Jean-Paul Sartre called as facticity. Facticity, according to him, refers to the things in our lives that are already given. Uulitin ko, ayon kay Jean-Paul Sartre, pag sinabi daw nating facticity, ito ay tumutukoy sa lahat ng bagay at realidad na bahagi na ng ating pagkatao simula pa noong tayo ay isilang at maging bahagi ng mundong ito. At ano-ano po yun? That includes our gender, ang ating kasarian, kung tayo ay babae or lalaki, our color, kung tayo ay balingkinitan, kayumanggi, maputi, maitim, our race, our social status, ang kalalagayan natin sa buhay, ang estado natin sa buhay, mayaman ba tayo, mahirap ba tayo, nakaaangat ba tayo, o kabilang ba tayo dun sa tinatawag na poorest of the poor, even our genes and many others. Sa makatuwid, ito ang mga realidad na bahagi na ng ating pagkatao simula pa noong tayo ay isilang. Hindi natin ito hiniling, hindi natin ito pinili, hindi natin ito inasam, at maaaring hindi natin ito ginusto. But the moment we were born, all of these were already given and became part of our lives as a human person. And again, according to Jean-Paul Sartre, these realities set a limitations for us as an embodied spirit. Ang taong ipinanganak ng mahirap, ang taong ipinanganak ng dukha, ang taong bulag, ang taong ipinanganak ng may kapansanan. Sa palagay nyo ba, ginusto nila ang bagay na ito? Definitely not. But as it described, facticity are the things in our lives that are already given. Facticity is not limited to the givens that we have acquired in our birth. Facticity also refers to all the details that surround us in the present as being in the world in the here and the now. That includes our environment, our language, our past decisions, our past and present relationships, and even our future death. All the facts that we currently have are part of our limitation as a human person. Like for example, a father who decided to get a vasectomy, then that decision already imposes limitations on him. Another example, may isang Koreano na hindi nakakapagsalita ng wikang Filipino at ng wikang Ingles. O sabi niya, kung ako lang ay nakakapagsalita ng wikang Filipino at ng wikang Ingles, hindi ito makakasagabal sa akin upang makipag-usap ako sa kahit anong lahi ng tao. But, since then, hindi siya isang Filipino and he or she cannot speak English or Filipino fluently, that hinder him or her to talk with other people. And that imposes limitations. Thus, if we look at every aspect of who we are right here and now, we will realize that our being in the world imposes practically countless limitations on us. And this is the reality of an embodied being, that we shall always have limitations by the facticity of our existence. Ay? So bilang tao na may katawan at may kaluluwa, bahagi ng konsepto ng pagiging tao, ng kanyang pagkakakilanlan or ng pagkatao ng isang tao, ang tinatawag nating facticity. Again, these are the things that are already given from the moment of your birth. The second part or the second factor which could be considered as part of our imperfections as an embodied spirit is the reality that we are spatial-temporal being. Meaning, the fact that we are born and that we exist in a particular place and time already sets limitations on us that may be considered on different levels. On the level of temporality, the most obvious limitation is no other than our finitude, which means that we will not live forever. We have our limited stay in this world. Whether we like it or not, how much we love our family, how much we were loved by other people, we have to accept that we are all temporary here on earth because we will not live forever. And that limits us, especially in our stay in this world. Okay, if you will try to look at the different pictures, these are actually portraying our childhood activities when we were young. Diba? Bata pa lang tayo, anong gusto natin? We always want to become older. We always want to become adult. So, ito sa mga babae ito, no? So, kung naaalala nyo, yung karanasan ninyo nung mga bata kayo, anong gusto nyo palaging ginagawa? Dahil nakikita nyo ang mama ninyo, ang ate ninyo, ang tita ninyo, na naglalagay ng cosmetics, naglalagay ng makeup sa mukha, naglalagay ng lipstick sa labi, at kung ano-ano pang kolorete at pampaganda sa katawan, then anong ginagawa natin? We tend to imitate them. For boys, ito naman, di ba? Batang-bata pa, pero pormahang pang matanda na. Batang-bata pa, pero gayak, manliligaw na. Okay? Another thing, ito, when you were a kid, when you were a child, these are the things that you always pondered. You want to become future photographer. 'Di ba? Meron din sa inyo na bata pa lang nakikita na ang sarili that sooner or later, they will become teacher. Kaya anong ginagawa? Kahit yung mga kapitbahay, kalaro, ay tinuturuan ng kahit ano. Bahagi din ng pagkatao natin at ang pagkabata natin na kapag naglalabas si nanay, naglalabas si tatay, or ang ating kasambahay, we tend to be part of that activity. And even kapag nagluluto si nanay ng pagkain, nakikihalubilo tayo. Nakikisawsaw tayo. Okay? Aside from that, look at these pictures. Ano nakikita natin? These are actually what we like. Diba? Minor de edad pa lang nagve-vape na. Minor de edad pa lang tumitikim na ng alak. Wala pa sa tamang edad, gusto nang maranasan ang mga nararanasan ng nakatatanda, gusto nang gawin kung ano ang ginagawa ng mga nakatatanda. Okay? From that point, we could say that when we are younger, we want time to speed up because our youth prevents us from doing what adults seem to enjoy. In other words, there are so many not yet. You are not yet allowed to eat certain food, drink certain beverages, watch certain movies, wear particular clothes, and go to certain places. So the lack of time in the sense of youth possess limitations on us. We feel that we are being restricted by people, particularly our parents, our brothers and sisters, and our significant others, and so on and so forth. So for example, when we want to do things, on closer inspection, however, you will realize that it is our being embodied that prevents us from doing a lot of things because our body is not yet prepared for certain activities. Di ba? Akala ninyo, pinipigilan kayo dahil bawal. Akala ninyo, hindi kayo pinapayagan dahil galit sa inyo ang magulang ninyo. But in reality, that is part of becoming embodied spirit. Our body itself prevents us from doing lots of things. Yung mismong katawang lupa natin ang hindi nagbibigay ng kapahintulutan na gawin natin ang lahat ng bagay na gusto nating gawin at gusto nating maranasan. Bakit? Sapagkat ang ating katawan ay hindi pa handa sa mga gawaing ito. Why? Because there is always a perfect and right age for that. Ba? On the other hand, those who have an advanced age will also experience limitations of a different kind. There are so many no longer for them. They are no longer allowed to eat certain food, drink certain beverages, go to certain places, and do particular activities. And just like the youth, they feel that they are being restricted by people, especially by children. On a closer look, however, they will realize that it is their being embodied that prevents them from doing a lot of things again and again because their body is no longer capable of certain activities. Ito naman, kabaligtaran. May mga bata na gusto kaagad maranasan ang ginagawa ng matanda, subalit hindi pa pwede. Bakit? Sapagkat ang iyong katawan ay hindi pa handa para sa mga gawaing ito. On the other hand naman, may mga matatanda or nakatatanda na gusto nilang balikan kung ano yung dati nilang ginagawa. For example, yung mga lolo at lola natin, gustong maghabulan, gustong mag-exercise, gustong kumain ng matatamis, gustong kumain ng maalat, gustong sumakay sa iba't ibang rides sa Enchanted Kingdom, and so on and so forth. But they were restricted. Not because they are not prepared anymore, but rather they are no longer capable of certain activities. Perhaps, a physiological example may easily drive the distinctive limitations of not yet and no longer. Childbearing clearly limits both the young and the old. A very young girl is not yet capable of reproduction, and a very old woman is no longer capable of reproduction. In both instances, it is the body which sets this limitation. Okay? So nakikita natin, being embodied spirit, it is part of our limitations. Our body itself will set this kind of limitations in us. Next, on the level of our being spatial individuals, we are limited by our bodies to be present in two or more places at the same time. We are set to be at one place at a time. Meaning to say, I cannot be in Manila and in Cebu at the same time. Why? Because my body does not allow me to. And I cannot be in Manila this minute and be in Cebu the next minute. This one clear limitation is experienced by many Filipino families, especially nowadays that most of our family members or some of our family members, particularly your parents, are serving as overseas Filipino workers abroad. Okay? 'Di ba? Kaya nga may mga Pasko na ang panalangin ng mga tatay at ng mga nanay na nagtatrabaho sa ibang bansa, sana nandyan ako sa Pinas, kasama ko kayong nagse-celebrate ng Pasko. Okay? May mga anak din naman na malayo sa kanilang pamilya, halimbawa't nagkasakit si nanay, nagkasakit si tatay, walang ibang masasabi ang anak kundi, Nay, Tay, sana nandyan ako sa tabi ninyo para mabantayan at maalagaan ko kayo. From that scenario, we could say that it is part of our limitation as spatial-temporal being. The reality that we are limited by our bodies to be present in two or more places at the same time. Thus, we could say that as an embodied being, we are subjected to the physical laws of our universe and simply admit that we are restricted by our spatial nature. On the level of understanding, we consider our spatial-temporal situation as imposing a limit on us, as it sets out to be our preconditions of our understanding. In other words, our being situated in a particular time and place shall prescribe the way we look at and understand things. Think of our age, culture, and past experiences as optics that we wear every time we look at the world. No matter how hard we try to look at the world in an objective manner, our spatial-temporal situation will be there to taint it. And in the same way, no matter how much we imagine ourselves looking at something using someone else's perspective, we cannot do so. We will always have our own spatial-temporal condition at the backdraft of our understanding. So, our spatial-temporal situation limits us from obtaining a purely objective perspective or someone else's perspective. And this may be a source of problem at times. We may think that we understand someone when we put ourselves into their shoes. However, we need to to ask ourselves if we can really set aside our biases and use the perspective of another person, or if we can really be purely objective. So anong ibig sabihin po nito? Sa level daw ng ating pag-unawa at pang-unawa sa ating kapwa, ito yung isang realidad at isang katotohanan na may mga pagkakataon sa buhay natin na merong magko-confide, merong kakausap sa atin, may maglalabas ng sama ng loob, may magagalit sa atin, or merong pupuna sa ating ginagawa, o maaari din namang may iba't ibang senaryo na mangyayari sa buhay ng ating kapwa. At sa level ng ating pag-unawa, ito yung limitasyon natin bilang tao. Ano yon? Na kailanman, bagamat ilagay natin ang ating mga paa or ang ating mga sitwasyon sa sitwasyon ng ating kapwa or sa sapatos ng ating kapwa, hindi pa rin magiging ganap, hindi pa rin magiging tiyak ang ating pagdamay. Bakit? In one way or another, even though we could say that we will try our best to put our feet on the shoes of others, that is always impossible for us as human person to be part or to be on the same situations as others are experiencing. Okay? Anong ibig sabihin? Mananaig at mananaig pa rin kung ano yung sarili nating pananaw, kung ano yung ating pinaniniwalaan. And that limits us as a spatial-temporal being. In the level of our understanding, hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na nauunawaan kita. Na alam ko ang pinagdaraanan mo. Dama ko kung ano ang pinagdadaanan mo. Again, on the level of understanding, that imposes a limits on us as spatial-temporal being. Pwedeng nakapagbibigay tayo ng payo, subalit kailanman yung pananaw ng ating kapwa, yung disposisyon ng ating kapwa, kailanman ay hindi natin magiging pananaw at disposisyon bilang tao. Bakit? Because we are unique. Sabihin man natin na tayo ay parehong babae, parehong lalaki, kahit pa tayo ay kambal, yet we are unique. We have our own identity as a human person. At kung ilalapat natin itong pagkakakilanlan nating ito sa sitwasyon na pinagdaraanan natin sa buhay, kailanman hindi magiging ganap, hindi magiging tiyak ang tinatawag nating pagdamay at pag-unawa sa tao. Bakit? Sapagkat sa kahuli-hulihan, ang panghahawakan pa rin natin ay ang sarili nating pananaw, ideya, filosofiya at paniniwala sa buhay. The body as an intermediary. The body as intermediary is another difficulty that arises out of an embodied subject. We have established that we are our bodies, but also more than our bodies, our body then serves as an intermediary between us and the physical world. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Definitely, without your body, you cannot experience the reality of being in the world. Hindi naman pwedeng kaluluwa ang mapadpad dito sa mundo para maranasan yung tinatawag nating physical world or ang mundong ating ginagalawan. Definitely, it is our body which serves as an intermediary between us and the physical world. It is because of my body, again, that I experience the world from a particular bodily standpoint, from a lying standpoint along the shore of a beach, or from a sitting standpoint beside the window of a plane, or many others. Then, it is also because of my body that I experience the world as my world and not the world of others. I can always imagine myself living as a rock star, but will never really know how it is to be a rock star unless I become one myself. But more concretely, I can never be Johnny Depp, and conversely, Johnny Depp cannot be me. My body then limits my experience of the world to my world. Furthermore, my body as intermediary limits me in communicating with other people. Through my body, I can communicate using words or express myself through bodily gestures. This may now pose limitations concerning communication and expression. Why? As an embodied spirit or subject, we cannot, by the use sheer will, tell other people what we have in mind or what we feel. We have to make use of words or bodily expressions to accomplish this task. Words are often our instrument to convey what we want to express, be it an idea or an emotion. But we know that words are limiting. We are constrained by language. When we say, I love you to someone, for example, do these words accurately express what we feel for the other person? Can words really capture the things that we want to express? From experience, we know that we are being limited by our language when we cannot put into words what we want to express. That is why we sometimes say that words fail us. In this way, we may say that our body restricts us from fully disclosing ourselves to other persons. O, ano pong binibigyang diin dito? The body as intermediary. Binanggit ko kanina, ang katawan natin ang nagsisilbing tagapamagitan sa pisikal na mundo na ating ginagalawan at sa karanasan nating pangtao. Sa madaling salita, hindi natin mararanasan ang pisikal na mundo kung wala tayong katawan. Subalit, ang katawan nating ito mismo ay nagbibigay ng limitasyon at kahinaan sa atin bilang tao, lalo na sa larangan ng pagpapahayag ng ating damdamin at ng ating saloobin. Katulad sa ibinigay na halimbawa, yung salitang I love you, bagamat ito'y gamit na gamit at alam ninyo kung ano ang kahulugan, the moment you say I love you, that words or these words will not contain everything. Kung ano ang iniisip mo, ano ang saloobin mo. When the person say, sorry, definitely, hindi ito ang kabuuan ng kanyang pagkatao. Kung kaya nga, our body as intermediary sets that limitations within us. Ito ay bahagi ng ating kahinaan. Nalilimitahan tayo mismo ng ating katawan sa larangan ng pagpapahayag ng kabuuan ng ating sarili. O di ba kapag kayo pinapasulat ng essay, particularly kapag ang essay na gagawin ninyo ay English, o anong sinasabi nyo? Ma'am, pwede po bang Tagalog na lang or Filipino na lang? Kasi hindi ko po masyadong ma-express yung sarili ko. And that exactly limits us as a human person. As an embodied spirit, as an embodied subject, we cannot, by the use of sheer will, tell other people what we have in mind or what we feel. Okay? Kaya nga po, again, bilang kaugnay ng ating level of understanding, hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na sa pamamagitan lang ng simpleng salita, sa pamamagitan lang ng simpleng pananahimik, hindi natin pwedeng sabihin mauunawaan ka ng tao. Okay? Kaya nga anong sabi natin? Makinig ka sa sinasabi ng mundo at sa kung ano ang iniisip ng tao sa'yo, then you will become prisoner of your own mindset. Ikaw mismo ang nagkukulong sa sarili mong tanikala sa sarili mong Bartolina ng pag-iisip at pagkakaroon or pagsasaalang-alang ng pananaw ng ibang tao or kung ano ang iisipin ng ibang tao sa'yo. Again, our body as intermediary sets that limits. Now, transcending limitations. Sabi natin, facticity are the things which are already given. Another thing, as spatial-temporal being, we were limited to be on the same place at the same time. As spatial being, we were also limited on how long we will stay here on earth because all of us are mortals. All of us, whether we like it or not, we will die. And our body as intermediary, we were limited by expressing what we feel and what are the things which are in our mind. At kung titingnan natin, ang lahat ng ito ay bahagi ng ating pagkatao bilang nilalang na may katawan at may kaluluwa. That is why, sabi natin, ano ang ating magagawa? Hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na wala tayong magagawa. Kasi given na yan, nandyan na. Di yan na, tanggapin na lang. No! We still can act. Meron pang pamamaraan. How can we address those limitations? Definitely by transcending those weaknesses and limitations. Pag sinabi nating transcendence, pag sinabi nating transcending, ito yung pagkakaroon ng panibagong pananaw, pagkakaroon ng panibagong disposisyon. Paano natin ito lalagpasan in a positive way? Again, transcending limitations. Let us begin. Let us consider our facticity first. We cannot simply change our facticity, but what we can do is change our attitude towards them. At times, we use our facticity as an excuse for our difficulties and failures. I want to repeat those words or phrases. We cannot simply change our facticity, but what we can do is change our attitude towards them. The reality that you were born with disability or incapability, definitely you cannot change that because that is our facticity. But we can change our attitude towards them. Look at the photos. Ipinanganak silang pilay, ipinanganak silang may kapansanan, but look at them. Ginagawa nilang makabuluhan ang kanilang buhay sa pamamagitan ng pagiging positibo sa buhay. Hindi nila mababago ang kanilang kapalaran. Hindi nila mababago kung ano ang katotohanan na sila'y ipinanganak na may kapansanan. Subalit, they can make their lives more meaningful by changing their attitude towards the realities that they are experiencing. At ganun din tayo. May mga bagay na bahagi na ng pagkatao natin simula pa pagkabata. May mga realidad, katotohanan, senaryo or pangyayari na bahagi na ng ating buhay at kung titingnan natin ay wala tayong kakayanan na mabago ang mga bagay na ito. Subalit, palagi nating tatandaan, hindi man natin mabago ang senaryo, sitwasyon at kondisyon ng buhay na kinasasadlakan natin. Maaari naman nating baguhin ang ating pananaw, pag-uugali kung papaanong haharapin ang mga realidad na ito. Let's continue. We may say, for example, one may claim that he cannot travel abroad because he was born poor, or that he did not finish school. This is what happens when we let our facticity define who we are. We treat our facticity as if life has destined us to it, like being born in a poor family or being born disabled. What is important is to see that we are free to define who we are and who we are to be. Again, these photos are called as facticity. Kahirapan, estado sa buhay, ipinanganak ka sa isang pamilyang marupok, away dito, away doon, sigawan si nanay at si tatay, sa isang pamilyang hindi mo maintindihan kung saan ka sasama. Pero ito na ba ang kapalaran mo? Hanggang dito ka na lang ba? O kaya pagdating mo sa school, ay, nag-away si nanay at si tatay, bagsak ako. Ganun na lang ba ang buhay mo? Palagi mo na lang bang gagamiting excuse yung tinatawag nating facticity? Ay? Sabi natin, we have to transcend our limitations. Ipinanganak ka sa ganitong uri ng buhay, isinilang ka na siya ang nanay at tatay mo, then accept the fact that you belong to that kind of family. But do not contain in it. Hindi pwedeng hanggang dun ka na lang na sa lahat ng bahagi ng buhay mo ay gagamitin mong excuse si nanay at si tatay. O bakit wala kang assignment? Kasi si nanay, si tatay, hindi magkasundo. Palagi bang ganun na lang ang buhay? Do not make that facticity as an excuse, and that may let you fail in your lives. Take note. Hindi ang nanay at tatay mo, hindi ang pamilya mo, hindi ang estado mo sa buhay ang bumubuo ng sarili mong pagkakakilanlan at ano ang mararating mo pagdating ng kinabukasan. But rather, it is you yourself. Ikaw yan. It is you who define who you are. It is not your facticity. It is not your condition. It is not your status that will make a decision kung ano ang mangyayari sa iyo in the future. Again and again, it is you and not your facticity. Maaring ipinanganak ka ng mahirap. Sabi nga natin, or sabi ng isa sa mga pilosopo, ano sabi niya? Yung ipanganak kang mahirap, hindi yun kasalanan. Because that is part of your facticity. Pero yung mamatay ka, na ikay nananatiling mahirap, ibang usapan na yon. Bakit? Kasi maaaring wala kang ginawa para maiangat ang buhay mo. Yung ipinanganak kang walang alam, yung ipinanganak kang mangmang, at nanatili ka sa kamangmangan, at nanatili kang nagpadala, nagpasailalim, nagpasakop sa sitwasyon, kondisyon, kalalagayan mo sa buhay, at nung namatay kay ganun pa rin at walang pinagbago, teka muna, ibang usapan na yan. Again, your facticity will not define who you are at kung sino ka sa future. It will always be yourself, your disposition, your perspective, your attitude towards facticity will define who you are and what you will be in the future. Kung kaya nga, ano ang dapat nating gawin? We have or we should not look at our facticity as if they are our faith. Huwag nating tingnan yung facticity natin na siya na nating magiging kapalaran. But rather, we have to look at our facticity as a challenge for us to be creative with our life options. Again and again, there is no such thing as I have no choice. Uulit-ulitin ko yan sa inyo. Hindi nyo pwedeng ikatwiran na wala kayong choice. Lahat ng tao ay may choice. Ipinanganak kang mahirap, ipinanganak kang mangmang, ipinanganak kang salat sa karunungan, meron kang kapansanan, hindi yun ang katapusan ng buhay mo. You can look at them as challenges for you to be more creative with your life options. You will always have choice. Napakarami ng pagpipilian mo. Pwede mong piliin na magpatuloy. Pwede mong piliin na mangarap. Pwede mong piliin na mapuno ng pag-asa, pagpapatawad, pagmamahal, at pagyakap sa tinatawag nating tagumpay. Besides, our task then is to set out our possibilities and maximize these possibilities. Take note, all of us were unique, yet we were given with equal rights and equal possibilities in life. All you need to do is maximize these possibilities. Tumingin ka sa sarili mong kakanyahan, tumingin ka sa sarili mong talento, tumingin ka sa sarili mong kakayahan. Ang mga mata mo at lahat ng senses mo bilang tao, gamitin mo para ma-appreciate at makita mo ang halaga mo bilang tao. Hindi yung palagi kang self-pity. Ako na lang palagi ang iniiwan. Ako na lang palagi ang nasasaktan. Ako na lang palagi ang tinatalikuran. Try to see and to look at your worth as a human person. Pauulit-ulitin ko to sa inyo. Huwag niyong hanapin ang halaga ninyo bilang tao sa ibang tao. Sapagkat kung ikaw sa sarili mo, hindi mo makita ang sarili mong halaga bilang tao, walang sino man ang magpapahalaga sa iyo. You have to see your own worth. May halaga ka. You have different opportunities. You were given different possibilities. All you need to do is maximize all of them. Not for the other people, but for yourself first. Because others will follow. Think of facticity as colors. What does it mean? Every person will receive a set of color distinct from each other. It is now up to the person how he will use these colors to paint his life. The possibilities of the color combinations and the possible images to be painted are endless. Okay. Pause for a while tayo. Tingnan nating mabuti. Look at your own selves. Look at your own worth. Look at your own purpose in life. And think your facticity as colors. Tingnan mo ang realidad ng buhay mo bilang kulay. Lahat tayo ay tumanggap ng pare-parehong kulay. May kanya-kanya tayong kulay na pinanghahawakan. At nasa sa atin, papaano natin gagamitin ang kulay na ito upang makabuo tayo ng iba't ibang mas magagandang kulay. Pwede nating pagsama-samahin ang kulay na ito para makabuo tayo ng mas maganda. That colors will be used in order for us to provide and to create a new image. Kaya nga sabi dyan, The possibilities of the color combinations and the possible images to be painted are endless. Bakit? Sapagkat ikaw ang nagpipinta ng sarili mong larawan. Ikaw ang bumubuo ng sarili mong pagkatao. Kung sa palagay mo at kung sa pagnanais mo'y gusto mong maging malamlam ang buhay mo, then it is up to you. Pero kung ninanais mong makabuo ng isang buhay na punong-puno ng kulay, nasa mga kamay mo pa rin yan. Again, huwag mong hanapin ang halaga mo sa ibang tao, kundi sa sarili mo mismo. And again, this is our facticity. Let us continue. Spatial-temporal being. Our being limited due to our being temporal is something which bothers a lot of people. We are more concerned about the future and or the past. That is why we never appreciate the present. Ito yung katotohanan. Nakaraan na nga, nakalipas na, ilang taon na ang lumipas, bumabalik at bumabalik ka pa din sa nakaraan. Gayun din naman, may mga taong advance naman mag-isip. Nasa present ka pa, pero ang iniisip mo na anong mangyayari kinabukasan. Para yung isang relasyon, nagsisimula ka pa lang, ang iniisip mo na kaagad yung pagtatapos. Kakapasok mo pa lang sa isang relasyon, ang iniisip mo na kaagad kailan ito matatapos. Paano kapag nagloko si lalaki? Paano kapag niloko ako ni babae? Paano kapag nag-away kami? Wait, stop ka muna. Sabi ni Pascal Blaise, the present is never our goal. The past and present are our means. The future alone is our goal. Thus, we never live, but we hope to live. And as we are always hoping to be happy, it is inevitable that we will never so. Yung kasalukuyan, hindi ito yung tugatog ng hangganan natin. Yung nakaraan at ang kasalukuyan ang magiging daan upang matagpuan at marating natin yung ating goal at walang iba yun kundi ang panghinaharap. Kung kaya nga hindi tayo nabubuhay lamang, walang lamang. Okay? Nabubuhay tayo upang umasa na kaya natin. Again and again, do not be more concerned about the future and or the past. Bakit? Kasi kung ang ating concern ay ang nakaraan at ang panghinaharap, we will never appreciate the present. Huwag kang mabuhay sa nakaraan at huwag ka ding mabuhay sa hinaharap. Enjoy the present moment. Kung ano ang nangyayari, enjoy. Appreciate the present. Masyado tayong advance mag-isip. Yung iba naman masyadong late mag-isip. Naghiwalay na nga, natapos na nga, babalik at babalik ka pa. Ay, hindi ako sanay na wala siya. Bakit pinanganak ka bang kasama mo siya? Kasi naman, iniwan ako, lagi na lang akong iniiwan. Then what? Anong gagawin mo? Alam mo pala, lagi kang iniiwan, mabubuhay ka pa ba sa nakaraan mo? Move on. Move forward. Life does not end in the past. And life will always continue if you will appreciate the present moment. Yung iba nagmamadali. Diba? Sa mga post ninyo, inom dito, inom doon, vape dito, vape doon. Nagmamadali. Wait for the future. Wait for your turn. O kaya yung iba, anong ginagawa? Nag-aasawa agad. kahit hindi pa takdang oras. O at the end, broken family. Sino ang apektado? Walang iba kundi ang bata. O kundi kayo. Huwag kayong magmadali. Wait for your turn. Okay? I will repeat. According to Blaise Pascal, the present is never our goal. The past and present are our means. The future alone is our goal. Thus, we never live, but we hope to live. And as we are always hoping to be happy, it is inevitable that we will never sow. Sabi dyan, hope, hold on, pain ends. It is a challenge on how to make our lives more interesting and meaningful, and a challenge to make the most out of time in this life. Sabi nga natin, you will live once. Kaya, enjoy your life. Hindi sa pamamagitan ng mga masamang gawain. Sabi ni Ma'am Rosel, ngayon lang ako mabubuhay, di magpapakalasing na lang ako, gagawin ko na lang lahat ng bagay na gusto kong gawin. Teka muna, nasa na pagiging rasyonal mo? Sabi natin, human person is created and gifted with intellect. Gamitin mo yung utak mo. Sabi dyan, more interesting and more meaningful. Ano ang kahulugan ng buhay kung tatapusin mo ito sa pamamagitan ng isang empty lights? Ano ang kabuluhan ng buhay kung tatapusin mo ito sa pamamagitan ng pagpapakamatay? Mag-isip ka nga. Think. Because that made us different from all other creatures. We are rational beings. We were gifted with our intellect, our capacity to think, our capacity to analyze everything before we decide or before we commit decision. Live your life to the fullest. Make the most out of our time. Make the most out of our life. At papaano magiging meaningful ang buhay mo? Always do the good. Always do the truth. Always do what is just. GRTJ lang yan. Do what is good, right, true, and just. And I'll assure you that everything will be fine. And you will be happy. And you will find your lives more interesting for that. Besides, appreciate what is present in our space. Ngayon, nakasama mo pa yung mga magulang mo, kasama mo pa yung pamilya mo, enjoy the rest of the days, the rest of the time that you were with them. Kasi may mga bata na hindi nakasama yung pamilya. Ito yung present scenario na meron ka, enjoy. Matalak man si nanay, madalas ka man napapagalitan ni tatay, appreciate them. Kasi yung iba, walang tatay. Yung iba, walang nanay. Okay? Hindi yung tsaka ka iiyak, tsaka ka magbibigay ng kung ano, kung kailang patay na. O, kaya nga may kasabihan tayo, di ba? Aanhin pa ang damo kung patay na ang kabayo. Huwag mong hayaan na mahuli ka sa lahat ng bagay or sa pagkakataon na ibinibigay sa'yo. Appreciate what is present in our space. If you are with your family, then show how much you love them. Sabi niyo, ma'am, iniwan naman ako ng tatay ko. Ma'am, iniwan naman ako ng nanay ko. Then what? At the end, utang mo pa rin, utang na loob mo pa rin yung buhay na mayroon ka sa kanila. Naging miserable ka, tapos isisisi mo sa kanila? No. It is you who are making your own life. It is not your parents. They are just your guide. They are just your facilitators. Your teachers are also your facilitators. But at the end, ikaw at ikaw pa rin ang bubuo ng pagkatao mo. Appreciate what is present in your space. You are with your friends, loved ones, make the most out of that presence. Ba? Enjoy. Hindi yung igugugol nyo ang panahon para mag-away, magsumbatan, para isumbat ang kakulangan ng bawat isa. Take note, walang perpektong tao. But we can have a perfect bonding. We can have a perfect timing for all those things if we will try to look at things in a new perspective. Balik tayo sa kahulugan ng philosophy. Sabi natin, philosophy is a vision. It is a new way of looking at things. Isang pamamaraan ng pagtingin sa bagay-bagay sa panibagong pamamaraan or sa kakaiba or sa ibang perspektibo. Okay? Huwag tayong manatili sa problema. We have to control the problems, and not the problems will control us as a human person. Make yourself a priority once in a while. It's not selfish. It's necessary. Okay? May mga pagkakataon na dapat nating isaalang-alang ang sarili natin. Magkaroon tayo ng panahon na tumahimik. Ito ang kulang na kulang sa mundo. Yung katahimikan, ang ingay ng social media, ang ingay ng Twitter, ang ingay ng Instagram, ang ingay ng TikTok. Find that sacred place and sacred space for you to reflect upon who you are. Besides, treasure friendship in whatever form it takes. Because at the end, yung pamilya mo, yung kaibigan mo, sila yung dadamay sa'yo. Value the people and things around us. Because they come and go. At wag nating hintayin yung pagkakataon na kung kailan wala na sila, tsaka tayo magkakandarapa na hilingin na sana nandyan pa sila. And last, believe in God. And try to rest in God. Napapagod kayo, ang daming ginagawa, ang daming activities. Magpahinga ka. Pero yung pahinga mo, hindi yung pahinga na nakahiga ka, hawak mo si cellphone at nagbabrowse ka sa FB, nagbabrowse ka sa mga social media accounts mo. No. Rest in God's loving presence. And I'll assure you, you will find out the rest and the happiness that you are looking for if you will rest in God. God will make a way when there seems to be no way. Ito naman palagi. Hindi tayo ang humahanap ng paraan para makatagpo natin ang Diyos. It is always God who took the initiative to be with us. And please appreciate that way and that time na makasama natin Diyos. Body as intermediary. Be more creative in our expressions. Make more creative ways of conveying our message. O, di ba? Napapagod kayo, yung simpleng pangangamusta sa isa't isa, that matters a lot. Nanghihina ka, send a message to your friends asking for help. Yung mga pagdamay. Work on a good relationship with others. And be responsible, be patient, and be sensitive. Yung mga salitang binibitawan natin sa kapwa natin, minsan akala natin joke-joke lang. But try to be sensitive. Palagi niyong ilagay ang sarili mo sa kinalalagyan at kinasasadlakan ng kapwa mo para malaman mo ano ang pakiramdam. Iba-iba tayo ng damdamin. Iba-iba tayo ng pagkatao. Merong akala natin joke-joke lang ang lahat. Pero sa kanila, dinidibdib at dinadamdam pala nila yon. Again, hindi tayo ang pumili ng kapalaran na meron tayo. Yung mukha na meron ka, nagwapong-gwapo ka sa sarili mo, hindi yan sa'yo. Pahiram lang yan sa'yo. Kaya hindi natin dapat ipinagmamalaki. At yung may mga mukha na sa inyong palagay ay hindi kaaya-aya, do you think ginusto nila yon? Definitely not. Kaya hindi nyo dapat sila binubuli. Okay? Because at the end of our lives, ang lahat ay ibabalik natin sa kung sino ang nagpahiram sa atin. Everything will fade, but the love of God will not. So be responsible, be patient, be sensitive. Think before you click. Think before you talk. Sabi nga natin, less talk, less mistake. Be more creative in our conveying or in conveying our message to others. Establish our relationship with others. And for that, it is the end of our lesson. I do hope that you learned something from this lesson. Again, thank you very much and God bless you all.